Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good? You have a good first day? Hopefully you had a good first day. I hope everybody had fun last night, but not too much fun because we've got a lot planned, obviously, for tonight. Ending with the New York State Beer Competition Awards ceremony right here in this very room. And there will be a party sponsored by Malt Europe. So please, I hope everybody who entered the competition this year, right? Okay, great, awesome. It's going to be a good night. We've got a lot of surprises, and it's going to be a fun night. And we also have another great morning and another great keynote, which I'm super excited about. We have Audra Gaiziunas with us today, and she's attended almost every single conference of ours, right, as a speaker, and we're super happy to have her as a keynote this morning. But before we begin, I'd like to bring up our Director of Partnerships, Megan Connolly-Haupt, to say hello to a few sponsors, to say thank you to a few sponsors.
Good morning. I know you're used to seeing Paul. It's weird to see someone else up here, isn't it? Okay, I'd like to recognize the sponsors again. This time what I'm going to do is go through the list of 30 sponsors, name the companies. If you are with that company, please stand up, remain standing, hold your applause, and when everyone is standing and I have finished the list, we will give one big round of applause. Got that? You guys did so good holding off on opening your beer yesterday that I know you can do this as well. Okay. Yakima Chief, Weber Packaging, Videojet, Viatran, TLF Graphics, The Hop Guild, Deutsche Beverage Technology, Prestige Glassware, Ollie, MMB & Co., Ultimate Brew Service, forgot I had these on. Genry, Hopsteiner, Ironheart Canning, Heart Print, Direct Source Packaging, Country Malt, Brew Recruit, Amaretti, Acrisure of New York, Power Market, Genesis, Van Alstyne, BMI, Lindenmeyer Monroe, Creveller Group, Malt Europe, and New York Craft Malt. Now for the real reason that I'm standing up here. I am so excited that this year we are recognizing outstanding allied companies that made an exceptional commitment to the New York craft beer community through their support of the NYSBA. These companies have been with us for years and have gone above and beyond as partners. It is an absolute pleasure working with them. So these three companies, I will name them. You can come up and we have awards. Amaretti, Deborah Coletti, and Linda Tassi, please come up. They are at booth number 1. Hopsteiner, Heather McReynolds and Charlie Tarlowski, booth number 62. And the Hop Guild, Chris Holden and team. Chris Holden, are you in the house?
With everyone?
Thanks, you guys, for everything you do.
Thank you so much.
Seriously, thank you to our sponsors and all of the exhibitors. We really couldn't do any of this without you. So let's get to our keynote this morning. I'm super excited to introduce you all to Audra Gaiziunas. If you don't know her, you should. She's one of my favorite people in the world. She is the owner for Brewed for Her Ledger, LLC, a management consultancy firm focused on providing strategic, financial, and accounting guidance to the craft alcohol community. She is currently serving as Burlington Beer Company's Chief Financial Officer and is an owner in Dissolver. Prior to launching her own company in 2013, she served as Dogfish Head Craft Brewery's controller and Mother Earth Brewing's chief financial officer. She has been working exclusively in craft beer for 15 plus years and is now a member of the Brewers Association Board of Directors. A graduate from Keenan Flagler. I knew I was going to say that, Keenan. I was going to say Kenan. It is Keenan Flagler, 1 MBA program at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Audra possesses 20-plus years experience in senior leadership roles in craft brewing, manufacturing services, nonprofits, and startups. She earned her undergraduate degree in accounting and business management as a double major from Loras College in Dubuque, Iowa in 1997. Ladies and gentlemen, Audra Gaiziunas.
My shoelace is untied, but I'm not going to worry about that. Good morning. How are you looking? How's sound? Good? Good? Oh, my goodness. It's so wild to be here and not do a technical talk. That's for later on today. I do have a 4 o'clock session that is going to be financially focused and based on numbers, and you will see me in full cosplay at that point in time. But this morning is not about that. Let's go back and think back and reflect on what has happened over the last 2 years, 2022 and 2023. These last 2 years have been challenging, to say the least. We were tested with 3 distinct cost increases in our raw materials. I counted 3 at least via my spreadsheet updates. Liability insurance skyrocketed in so many parts of the country. Many of us found ourselves short-staffed despite paying more per hour than we have ever paid before. And the various supply shortages, this past year especially was a doozy. And then the closures began and continue to this day. It's honestly been challenging for us in beer to stay positive about 2024 and focused on finding the light. Am I right? But then I look back at 2023, peer a bit more closely, sift through some of my brewery partners' numbers, and realize there were some golden moments for us too. For several breweries, 2023 was the first year cash flow positivity was accomplished. For another, 2023 was the year that the brewery implemented a focused approach to streamline their communications and increase efficiency, resulting in a higher net operating income. And this particular change in approach cost that particular brewery $0 additional dollars. For another, 2023 was the year a brewery's owner realized he was getting in the way of his own brewery's growth. So he relinquished the CEO role to someone else and took a more active role on the production side. This shift resulted in the brewery becoming more profitable and the owner happier because he was spending more time doing what he loved most, brewing beer for his people, for his community. We get so caught up in negative press and the stories we hear that the positive highlights that are out there get drowned out or ignored. But they are there, like glittering nuggets amidst a pile of rubble that we must simply take the time to pan through. When I taught at the Mid-Atlantic Brewers Conference in Pennsylvania last fall, I was approached after my session. Thanks for giving me hope, Audra. This entire day's theme seems to have been doom and gloom. Your talk inspired me and gave me hope for my brewery's future. Mind you, this was a technical finance talk, one with spreadsheets and formulas and a slew of ratios almost no one except me seems to get excited about. I try to make it more approachable by adding Star Wars elements throughout, but it got me to thinking, could elevating our financial literacy as a collective bring hope to many more of our brewery owners like it did this particular individual who had approached me? If we truly understood our financial statements and how our actions impacted each section, could our outlook change? Numbers always tell a story. And sometimes that story can be a real roller coaster of emotions page turner. Therefore, Could our understanding of finance actually serve to inspire not only us, but our entire team as well? I've been actively pushing for brewery-focused financial education ever since I spoke at my first Craft Brewers Conference in San Francisco in 2011. In 2011, I was presenting a workbook that I had created that would serve as an electronic brew and packaging log, whose final page was designed to automatically populate Section 3 of the quarterly TTB Brewers Report of Operations. I gave that workbook away to every attendee who requested it. The TTB attended my talk and offered me praise for the work that I had presented following my presentation. Every brewery should be using this, one of them noted, praising the workbook. Could you please send that to us? Oh, the TTB? And then the other agent requested some additional guidance and help, and that year there was no additional financially focused sessions. Go back through the archives and take a look. In 2012, in San Diego, I spoke at CBC again, this time on the steps to take for a financial software implementation. Back then, the only inventory management software game out there was Obeer in its fledgling state. There were no additional financially focused talks that year as well. I really could go on, looking back at CBCs over the past decade. Up until the last handful of years, there have been only 1 or 2 financially focused talks annually on the national level. And I get it. Finance and accounting, for many of us, is dry, the opposite of sexy. And in an area of our businesses, we like to shove to the back corner or outsource to an outside bookkeeper or CPA firm to worry about. Not us. Not cool. We as an industry didn't really want to include the nerdy kid with glasses on our dodgeball team. This exclusion made me push even that much harder for our time in the sun as bean counters in beer. In a capital-intensive industry exhibiting abnormal levels of growth and disproportionately low numbers of closures, shouldn't brewery-focused finance and accounting education naturally be a focus to help guide us through that growth and through the various cycles of business model evolution that follow? Well, I'm happy to report that we're finally there, gang. Brewery-centric finance and accounting is finally getting the attention it deserves. I believe the business interruptions and subsequent cash flow seesaw of COVID-driven programs yanked a spotlight onto us accountants. All of a sudden, we had to deal with PPP, EIDL, RRF, ERTC, and a slew of other rules-based 3- and 4-letter acronym, often confusingly named financial programs, and its ever-evolving rules. How can we spend this money? Do we have to pay it back? What forms do we need to complete? For the past 2 years, we've had at least 3 hour-long sessions focused on finance at CBC. We had a day-long financial leadership workshop at CBC last year, for which we received very positive feedback, and we're holding it again in Vegas at this year's CBC. I encourage you to sign up before it sells out like it did last year. I think we only have like 20 seats left. And if you aren't heading to Vegas this year, watch for the recording and take an intro to accounting class through your local community college or CDFI. Thank you for the transition, wherever that came from. But it's not enough just to be educated. We need to feel inspired and motivated to take action. I personally find inspiration in my work almost every day, and I find it in some of the most random spaces. One day, while I was crunching numbers at Mother Earth, where I served as CFO for 3 years, I decided to listen to a talk by radio personality Earl Nightingale called The Strangest Secret. He wrote and recorded this talk in the 1950s, and it was the first spoken word record to achieve gold record status, or in other words, sell more than 1 million copies. Early on in that talk, he defined success as, quote, the progressive realization of a worthy ideal, end quote. Success begins with a clear and definite goal, and one must be persistent and focused in pursuit of that goal. If one is working towards a predetermined goal and knows where he or she is going, that individual is a success. If he or she is not doing that, they're a failure. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. It is that person who tells themselves, I am going to become this, and then immediately begins to work on achieving that goal. Have you ever noticed that some breweries who become successful tend to continue to become successful? I'm not talking about the flash-in-the-pan hype breweries who relied entirely on marketing to bring people in, but then over time dwindle into near obscurity. I'm talking about grassroots, slow organic growth, fueled by reputation of the quality of beer and authenticity of the owners. Staying power. We're talking Sierra Nevada and Jim Koch, Dogfish Head and Sam Calagione. On a smaller scale and closer to my home in Asheville, North Carolina, Highland Brewing and Oscar Wong. Why do they continue to be successful? What separates the successful breweries from those who are currently flailing? Clearly defined goals. Goals that are supplemented with budgets, with projections going forward 12 to 36 months. Goals. Some of us have them, some of us don't. Breweries with goals know where they're going. And it's important we revisit these goals at least annually, and with how quickly our industry is evolving, I encourage even quarterly. Think of a ship leaving a harbor, and think of it with a complete voyage mapped out and planned. The captain and crew know exactly where it's going and how long it will take. It has a definite goal. 999 times out of 1,000, it will get to where it started to get out to get. Now, let's take another ship, just like the first, only let's not put a crew on it or a captain at the helm. Let's give it no aiming point, no goal, no destination. We just start the engines and let it go. I think you'll agree that if it gets out of the harbor at all, it will either sink or wind up on some deserted beach. It can't go anyplace because it has no destination and it has no guidance. I think back to a brew pub I worked very closely with for over 4 years in a leadership role to help transform it into a financially successful entity. It took time, almost 2 years. It took openness and willingness to change, goal setting, benchmarking our numbers against similar business models, annual budgeting, and regular check-ins. When I left, they never replaced my role. No budgets were set going forward, no regular benchmarking and analysis, opening a second tap room without due diligence of creating realistic projections based on foot traffic and location, additional hiring without any sort of ties to sales figures and other success metrics, no emergency financial plan should sales start to drop. The ship was sailing without a rudder. And a little less than 3 years later, it was gone. Closed. All of that hard work, gone. Without a plan, steps we need to take, and guidance without a goal. We're just brewing, hoping people will come in, watching what's happening around us, and seeing the worst. We take the focus off ourselves and shift it to what's happening around us and get lost in all of the bad news. We're humans, we can't help it. But now more than ever, we need to bring that focus back in, back to goals, back to budgets and projections, back to a clear line of sight where we are going with our entire team looking in the same direction. We become what we think about. I think back when I started my own consulting practice as a one-woman show. I had fallen head over heels with the beer industry, having worked in it for about 4 years at the time. I love the people, the camaraderie, the collaboration, the authenticity. I had finally found my home, where I belonged as an accountant. I had never fit into corporate America, and I had never fit the mold of a typical accountant. I love numbers, and I love spreadsheets, but hanging out with other accountants was such a drag. I kept questioning my choice of profession. How could I simultaneously love accounting and financial analysis while at the same time disliking every company where I worked? Feeling so out of place and restricted by rules and regularity and hierarchy. And then I stumbled upon the beer industry. Dogfish Head was hiring for a controller. And I ended up landing that position because, and I quote the director of HR, I was the quirky one. This misfit toy found her island of misfit toys, and it absolutely transformed my outlook on life and energized me like no other industry had done in the past. I started homebrewing, all grain from day one after 5 months of working professionally in craft beer. I threw myself into as many books, videos, and podcasts about beer as possible. I joined the North Carolina Craft Brewers Guild despite living in Delaware, and later on took the treasurer role for that organization. My friend circle grew to include both professional brewers and homebrewers. I selected female mentors whose path I wanted to emulate: Terry Ferendorf, Deb Carey, Carol Stout, and Kim Jordan. I actively chose to become who I thought about, whom I looked up to and respected. Anyway, fast forward about 4 years, and I had recognized that no one out there was helping the smallest breweries succeed. Allagash, New Holland, New Belgium, Sierra Nevada all had full-time experienced financial leaders, but no one was working with the startup, the fledgling brewery, who was barely producing 500 barrels, the small neighborhood brew pub producing 2,000 barrels sold entirely in-house. I watched breweries start to close due to simple, avoidable financial mistakes. And some of those breweries were producing some really good beer. I kept thinking, man, I could have helped them. Which then became, well, why don't I help them? And voila, Brewed for Her Ledger, my consulting practice, was born. I left my stable income at Mother Earth while in the middle of a contentious divorce to start my company because I believed in the beer industry, and I believed in my ability to help us. I just walked out of my marriage, and my partner froze my assets in the courts, so I had no savings nor nest egg to support me. I was recovering from my first traumatic knee surgery, hobbling around on crutches for about half a year. I moved from the center of the state to Western North Carolina, where I knew very few people. It was as if I was hitting the hard reset button on my life. Reboot. Start over. Next chapter. My inspiration this entire time? Independent beer. And the stories that made us. The stories that inspired each of us to willingly choose to go down this unpaved path because we knew as a collective we could create something special for our communities. A place to gather, a space to showcase and contribute our art. And those first 2 years coming out and being out on my own were so hard. I had left a stable income to become a consultant and building a name for myself without any marketing, without any advertising, Facebook ads, just through reputation, hard work, and word of mouth. It took so much time and effort. It took 2 full years before I was cash flow positive. This meant 2 years of putting my rent or monthly health insurance on a credit card because I wasn't bringing enough cash in to cover my basic expenses, let alone my car loan and student loan. But I believed in the beer industry, and I believed in what I was doing, what we were doing. I had a goal. I had a purpose. I was becoming what I was manifesting. I saw myself as a full-time fractional CFO for our industry, and I stayed the course until it happened. Now, 12 years later, I've worked with well over 300 breweries from coast to coast, from startup to regionals, and pretty much everything in between. My point here is that the path to financial success is not easy for any of us in beer, and it requires not just hard work, perseverance, and dedication, but also grasping and fully understanding the power of positive thinking and believing in oneself. Too easily we get bogged down by setbacks or get distracted by what's happening in our external environment, and we lose that positivity. And once that happens, the lens we look through becomes more clouded and gray, and we slowly start to spiral downwards. We become what we think about. We become what we manifest. My grandfather, my mom's dad, started a brewery in Lithuania alongside two of his friends shortly before World War II. If you know anything about the painful history of the Baltic countries of Eastern Europe, my family's ancestral country was occupied by Nazi Germany at the outset of the war, followed by the Bolshevik Russians. My grandfather's brewery was viewed by the Russians as a source of nationalist pride, and that his high standing within his community, what we would call an influencer today, made him a threat. So they arrested him and sent him and my grandmother off to a concentration camp, a labor camp in Siberia. My toddler mom was left in the hands of Russian foster care, who took great lengths to beat any sort of pride of being Lithuanian out of her. To this day, she has repressed most memories of this period of her childhood. I can't even imagine what that was like. We all know how World War II ended, and miraculously, my grandparents both survived the labor camp to see that day. They came back to Lithuania to find the brewery completely demolished, all paperwork of its existence destroyed, as if it had never existed. And rather than resign, give up, or allow his spirit to break, he doubled down on his belief in himself and started a new life with the circle of friends that he had left as a patriot freedom fighter, an underground rebel fighting the Soviet system. He never lost that spark, that positivity, despite his overwhelmingly negative circumstances. To this day, I draw inspiration from who he was and the community he created. He was a misfit toy of his time and place. He never gave up. He believed in his work. I started my consultancy in part to honor his legacy, to toast the David in the world of Goliaths, to help ensure each of us misfits toys has a voice at the table and the resources, and in my case, that being financial literacy, to make smart decisions for us as a collective to become what we manifest. In 2022, a brew pub in the Midwest approached me for help. They had been open for 7 years, had shown multiple profitable years, and had received financial support they had requested from PPP, EIDL, and RRF, and then found themselves in a $1.3 million loss position. I hopped on a Zoom with the owners. Audra, we have no idea how we became so upside down. We feel we're selling just as much, if not more beer than before COVID, and the deficit just keeps growing. Our beer keeps winning awards at GABF and the World Beer Cup, as well as locally. We're known for our quality, and our distribution footprint is even growing. We're at a complete loss and just don't know what to do. Do your managers know? I asked. Have you talked to them about what's going on? Well, no. We don't want to scare them or get the community rumor mill riled up and speculating about our future. We're the only ones who know and who look at those numbers. An absolutely valid concern. So we got to work. After completing a thorough financial analysis and benchmarking study, I presented my findings to the owners, as well as goals to work towards in order to get us to break even. We decided to set the financial goal of breaking even by month 12, then worked our way backwards to quarterly goals, and then finally monthly goals. We set milestones and actions we would take should this number drop below a certain level, or the sales mix shift to where gross margin dropped below X. In other words, we developed a financial emergency plan and then documented it and kept it in an easily accessible share drive. We then created a dashboard of key performance indicators we would have to hit, stemming from production to sales to marketing to profitability and balance sheet, with the big focus overall of debt reduction. All of these key performance indicators tied back and flowed into the goal of breaking even by month 12. Then the real work began. We pulled in the managers from every department: production, tap room, outside sales, kitchen, marketing, and the owners shared with them the current financial state of the brewery, our plan of action for the upcoming year, the dashboard we had just created, and our contingency plan should numbers start moving in the opposite direction. The first step was the hardest one for the owners to take because it placed them in a position of vulnerability. They were openly expressing their vulnerability to their staff, fearing shame, fearing it would make them appear weak and incompetent. Here we are in this lost position, and our brewery is failing. But look, no one is perfect. Therefore, everyone is vulnerable, period. Trying to hide your vulnerability is where the struggle begins. If you try to hide your vulnerability from yourself and your coworkers with rationalizations and domineering attitudes, you will destroy every single opportunity for synergy and collaboration around you. So it makes sense to try and approach vulnerability differently. And these brewery owners did. They came into their managers, to their staff, and said, "We need your help." I wish you could have witnessed the dynamics and the shift in the energy as I did, as the independent bystander. What can I do? How can I help? Well, we could feel things weren't going well, but we had no idea what was going on. Now that we know where we are, what's the first step for my department? It was as if some sort of fog had lifted, and this openness from the owners inspired the team into a "let's get after it" attitude. The next few weeks were spent in work sessions with me. In order to turn a company around as a team, everyone on the team has to possess a certain baseline level of financial literacy to operate on the same playing field. Financial literacy is the bedrock foundation for financial success. And that was my job. Every manager, regardless of department, learned about the basics of financial accounting as well as managerial accounting, so that they could read a balance sheet, an income statement, and understand how the statement of cash flow works, as well as how their actions impacted each one of those. They learned about direct and indirect costs, about overhead, and how to calculate all the key performance indicators and what each financial ratio meant. We used the brewery's actual financial statements as the basis for this education so that they could ask real questions and not just hypothetical ones. We had to get everyone speaking the same language before we could enact a meaningful change. The owners sat in on, fully engaged and involved in every single one of those sessions. It showed that they were just as committed to improving their own financial literacy, and it sparked so many tangents and brainstorming sessions that came about almost effortlessly as time progressed. I witnessed problem solving popping up dynamically as people gained greater confidence in their understanding of the numbers. I watched this group of individuals working together as a true team. From that point forth, we held meetings weekly. It followed the same format every single time, instilling consistency. And this made our meetings efficient. Every week, we calculated data points. Every fourth week, we'd review previous month financial results. Every quarter, we'd review the previous 3 months, then refresh our forecast, tweak our actions accordingly, and create side projects for both the brewery as well as each of us individually by department. For example, a production side project would include documenting the disassembly, troubleshooting, and cleaning of the canning line. The taproom manager side project was to create a written trainable guide for all taproom staff that could be kept under the bar for quick reference. No matter the project, the financial goal of breaking even by month 12 was the guidestone. And this is how we operated for the next year and a half. Meeting consistently, calculating data points consistently, identifying and solving issues as a team consistently, taking decisive action where the numbers fell outside, and when they fell outside an acceptable range. By month 18, which happened in 2023, this brewery was not only breaking even, it was cash flow positive. In 2024, they will be investing their own self-generated earnings into upgrading their production equipment as their sales continue to grow. To the owner's surprise, embracing vulnerability improved the team culture, which in turn boosted the brewery's financial performance. The underlying principle is rather straightforward. By embracing vulnerability, we create an environment that nurtures trust and opens communication. These are the integral components of both learning and innovation. I watched this brewery problem solve in such creative ways by the time they reached cash flow positivity. It was as if openness had become second nature to them, because it had. They became what they manifested. In another case, I was called in to complete an operational audit for a production brewery in the West. At the time, the brewery's founders were at odds with each other about the future of the business, which was a cause for great confusion and led to some misguided direction on behalf of the leadership team and the staff. Morale was low all around, and financial performance had stagnated. Everyone agreed that they needed to bring in help from the outside to bring focus to the brewery. What we decided was to implement something called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. EOS is not a computer operating system, it's a people operating system. It's a leadership philosophy based on open book management principles. As the implementer of EOS for many of my brewery partners, my first responsibility was to identify the members of our team that could participate in the EOS process. This process centers around creating a vision, utilizing data and implementing processes to establish a stronger foundation for a brewery to operate. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. The EOS system also forces you to look at your organizational chart. This means you aren't just evaluating if you have the right people, but if you have the right seats in the first place. The goal of the system is to build traction. Traction comes from having and maintaining consistency in meeting schedules and agendas for ensuring accountability. Did this system save the brewery? It sure did. A system and the entire management team and staff brought in, it created unity and accountability, led to the establishment of brewery core values that they still use to this day, and most importantly, it improved their focus. The EOS process is rooted in the concept of focus. It provides weekly, quarterly, and annual meetings in which leadership constantly challenges all to stay on task, focusing only on what will help the brewery reach its goals, with the vision guiding the entire decision-making process. The system helped one say no more than one would say yes. It guides you through compartmentalizing issues so your team can focus on what's important, allowing you to get more done in less time. There have been so many times this brewery forced themselves to say no to projects or opportunities because shifting their focus would have caused brewery-wide goals and initiatives to go off the rails. This process truly teaches you how to be a disciplined group. By solving the root cause issues, a brewery can achieve real, permanent change. You define what's important, who owns what, and precisely what success looks like. This information is then communicated by the leadership team to its staff on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis, which then creates accountability from the top down. Over time, I found that this brewery's employees appreciate the transparency and express willingness to accept ownership of projects or tasks that aren't completed in the time frame that they said it would be. The 4 compartments in the EOS are one-year goals, for which we set 3 to 7 per year, quarterly projects, referred to as rocks, 1 or 3 most important ones, 7-day to-do items, and issues, ideas, opportunities, and unresolved problems. This approach gave this particular brewery a real grasp of what the most important things they needed to focus on. Everything else would simply have to wait. The death of many breweries over the past 2 years stems from focusing on the wrong initiatives or letting distractions consume the team to the point where nothing moves forward. Fortunately, in this brewery's case, by getting out of their own way and implementing a focus on its core values, they were able to weather the post-COVID slump and are operating as a cohesive team still to this day. Last I checked in December of 2023, their sales had increased only 2% year over year, which is a common story in a maturing market for 2023, but they had eliminated about 6% in operational costs, resulting in a higher net operating income year over year. That's huge. What this brewery was able to do was figure out how to be more efficient, knowing they weren't going to be able to grow sales. So how do we become more efficient? Worthy to note, this brewery did not have to cut any people nor any hours to accomplish this goal. I turn to the Northeast for my next anecdote. The brewery had been open for almost a decade, had started out as distribution focused, and then slowly pulled back their footprint to expand their tap room, add a food component, open a second tap room, and shift focus to their retail channels. The shift in economic model should have resulted in a dramatic shift in profitability and increase in cash flow, but as an overall operation, neither was happening to any impactful degree. They had taken on some new debt to open the second tap room, and by early 2022, the variable interest rate pushed that monthly payment by about 30% up from the time that they had initially taken out that loan. Common story, yes? When I started working with this brewery, the managing owner holding majority ownership had shifted from a production-focused brewmaster to a CEO, spending very little time on the production floor, much more entwined with human resources, charting sales strategy, and managing supplier relationships. He understood his financial statements, but didn't have the time to look into the gaps and variances, nor strategize the next steps. That's where I came in to help him gain a greater understanding in those areas. What I quickly realized over the first couple months was how overwhelmed he felt. He had to focus on so many things simultaneously that he didn't feel he had firm control over anything. He told me some days, despite how much he loved and cared about the brewery that he had built from scratch, it seemed like the brewery had taken on a life of its own, and he felt more like a bystander than a participant. He felt he was getting in the way and creating friction amongst his leadership team. He missed being in the brew house, creating recipes, and building up his team of brewers. So we came up with a financial plan to get him back to his roots. He revamped some recipes and developed new ones to shift production to less expensive, yet still flavorful options for the taproom to increase margins. From the cash flow perspective, over a 12-month period, this shift in COGS, cost of goods sold, would pay for a new role without any additional cash flow outlay. And we would use that 12 months to find someone capable of the CEO role. Every month I'd check in, update the cash flow forecast, assist with vetting the candidates, and in month 10, we found one. In month 11, we sent the offer. In month 12, this new CEO joined the team. By the end of 2023, this brewery had its most profitable year to date, despite having an additional seat on board. The owner recognized that by getting out of the way, he created space. When you give other people the opportunity to step up, therefore expressing your openness to change, you lay the groundwork for new leaders to emerge. But more importantly, in this brewery's case, when you get out of the way, you make room for innovation. The best leaders provide the vision, the target, and the resources, and then turn the challenge over to a talented team to find a creative way to reach that goal. In this case, we brought in an individual who could execute the owner's vision while the owner could focus on creating new recipes and strengthening his team. This infusion of energy and focus was exactly what this brewery needed. When you step aside and let others take the lead, you allow yourself to move around and see the progress from different points of view. This enables you to partner, intervene, realign, and set expectations without blocking the brewery's progress. And finally, when you get out of the way, you help create a climate of trust. Trust in not only your leadership, but trust in themselves and in each other. Pull me aside sometime and have me tell you the story about one summer at a brewery in the South where we fired a brewmaster and a head brewer due to the toxic environment they had created over the years. And despite losing these two key production roles, what came out of that brewery the rest of the year blew everyone's socks off. We were short-staffed in production that entire second half of the year, but by placing our trust in the production team we had left, we created some of the most innovative, well-received, and creative beers of that brewery's entire history. The breweries that became the shining stars in 2023 had placed finance and communication as a primary focus. They understood that their sales mix and how to alter it if gross margin was deteriorating. They had a plan in place if monthly net operating income dropped to a certain level. They understood their cash cycle, when to invest during the high season, and how to conserve during the slow season. They ebbed and flowed with their business cycle because they understood how to read their cash flow statements and their seasonality. And I'm not just talking about ownership, I'm talking everyone. Every person from supervisory level upwards. If they were opening a new location, they were using well-vetted projections with worst-case scenarios as an integral part of that planning process. They were asking for feedback and help. They had established well-documented budgets that the entire team was not only aware of, but had been asked to be part of that process. So here we are in 2024. We have entered a mature market, and we're no longer seeing the growth as an industry that we did in the mid-2010s. And yet, the environment remains fast-paced and competitive. The significance of finance for a small brewery cannot be underestimated. As the lifeblood of any business, finance serves as the foundation upon which success, growth, and evolution are built. But couple that with a positive attitude, perseverance, and connection, which gives us purpose and meaning, and we're operating on the next level, gang. A brewery, like any other venture, requires a firm grasp of financial concepts to navigate its path to prosperity. It is here that the true power of finance and accounting reveals itself, empowering brewery owners to make informed, data-driven decisions, seize opportunities, and overcome the challenges like we saw in 2023. Finance enables strategic planning, ensuring that resources are allocated efficiently and effectively. From procuring high-quality raw materials to investing in new equipment, every decision has financial implications. By carefully managing cash flow, tracking and understanding expenses, and optimizing revenue streams, we can weather this storm and thrive in our constantly evolving market. Furthermore, finance plays a vital role in facilitating expansion and innovation. Whether it's launching new product lines such as hard tea or RTDs, expanding, or in some cases contracting distribution networks to focus on our home markets, or establishing a second tap room, finance provides the necessary means to explore new paths in the world of what-ifs, pragmatically. But at the same time, I cannot understate the importance of taking action, staying positive, despite setbacks, and there have been and will continue to be a lot of them, and keeping focus on the ultimate objective via clearly defined goals. Thinking and acting as if you have already achieved those financial goals. Envisioning the next steps as a team. Becoming what you are manifesting, what you think about every day. Sometimes that involves expressing vulnerability and asking for your help from your team along the way. The final slide, thank you. Yes. So grab a copy of Maria Pierman's Small Brewery Finance from Brewers Publications, or Gino Wickman's Traction from Audible or Amazon, and make elevating the financial literacy of yourself and your team a focus for 2024, alongside creating quality beer and fostering community connections. I promise you it will be enlightening, and you might even discover a thing or two about yourselves along the way. Cheers to a strong and focused 2024, New York. It will be okay. We got this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Audra. So just as a reminder, everybody did a really great job yesterday with the recycling efforts. Let's keep them up today. And also, if you were in the member meeting yesterday, please make sure those packed texts do not end up in the garbage. And also, the exhibit hall is open. First session starts at 11 a.m. I hope everybody has a great day.